Imagine investing a fortune to reform the country's country house, dreaming of the family moments that this place would provide. That's exactly what Anna did without hesitation when she learned that the roof empty and the walls threatened to crumble. After all, what mother doesn't want to see her grandchildren running through the garden, breathing fresh air, away from asphalt and pollution? But reality, as it often happens, reserved a bitter surprise. It was a muffled afternoon when Anna, her husband Kirill and the two young children finally reached the long-awaited country house. The path, marked by traffic jams and expectations, seemed not to be worth it. When opening the gate, they came across a scene that froze the blood. The mother, with a forced smile, blocked the entrance. "Here are Svetlana and her children. There is no room for you," he said, as if those words do not hurt like a stab. The father, without even looking at them in his eyes, just reinforced, "It is better to leave. Come back the other day." Like this. Anna felt the floor disappear under her feet. Almost 500,000 hryaris, each penny saved with sweat for 3 long years, intended for the dream of home ownership, had ended up in that renovation. And now, without warning, without explanation, were received as intruders. While the children, without understanding the rejection, looked confusing for their grandparents, Kirill, usually calm, felt something crackling inside. With a firm gesture, he took his cell phone and, without saying a word, took his father-in-law to a corner of the backyard. What happened in the next 5 minutes changed everything. Anna, through the window, saw her father's expression pass from indifference to embarrassment. Something in Kirill's tone, perhaps the firmness, perhaps the irrefutable evidence he showed on the phone, made the man, for the first time, look at his own daughter guilty. When he returned, his posture was different. "Tamara, we need to talk," he said, dragging her into the kitchen. The muffled murmurs who followed were punctuated by his mother's deaf protest, until finally she emerged with her face closed but resigned. "Svetlana," he announced with a forced formality, "it seems like there was a misunderstanding. My daughter and family were planning to stay here too. I think you could stay at your sister's house, isn't it? She lives so close." The woman, realizing the change in the air, did not argue. In less than an hour, she and the children disappeared, taking the weight of a situation that should never have existed. While Anna helped her children settle in the room that was now available, a question hammered in her head: how could people accept money for a renovation then close the doors for those who helped them? But when he saw Gleb breathing relieved by fresh air and Palutz playing in the garden, he knew that in the end the battle was worth it. Not for the parents' gratitude, which clearly still had a price, but for the smile of the children. And that, no misunderstanding could steal. When climbing to the large room upstairs, now impeccably reformed, with new wallpapers, modern furniture, and even a wall embedded on the wall, Anastasia felt the weight of every detail. As the children slept, she went down to the garden, where Kirill smoked in silence, a habit that only returned in times of extreme tension. He sat next to him on the wooden bench and asked bluntly, "What did you say to my father?" He has exhaled the smoke slowly, as if he wondered each word before releasing the truth. "I showed the account statement, 500,000, Nastia. I explained that it was our entire bottom to the apartment, saved in 3 years of sacrifices. I asked if, after such an investment, he didn't think our children had at least the right to spend summer here." Anastasia remained silent, her stars-fixed eyes, as if in them she could decipher the absurdity of those days. When he saw the value, fic. Or gaping, Kirill continued, his voice low, almost ironic. "I thought you had given a maximum of 50,000. His mother, by the way, fed this illusion. He said the money came from an inheritance of Uncle Tulia. That, let's face it, it's alive and well, as far as I know." Anastasia shook her head incredulously. "And who is this Svetlana, after all?" Kirill released a bitter laugh. "By the way, your mother found a way to monetize your renovation. Rent the room you paid for strangers, while your own grandchildren are left out." The silence that followed was cut only by the rustle of the leaves. The next morning, the air in the house was dense enough to be cut with a knife. Tamara Nikolaevna beat pots in the kitchen with a determination that sounded like protest, while Igor Gennadievich, visibly embarrassed, tried to redeem himself with their grandchildren, offering them the sweetest malnine in the orchard. After coffee, when Kirill took the children to play in the stream, Anastasia gathered courage and faced her parents. "Mom, Dad, we need to clarify things," the voice started, but without accusations. "I invested in this house every ruble we had kept for the apartment. $500,000 money we joined with Kirill, sweating in double shifts, renouncing vacation, small luxuries. I'm not asking gratitude. I helped because they are my parents, and I love them. But I expected, at the very least, that my children could enjoy this place, especially the Gleb, which needs air." Tamara Nikolaevna snorted, crossing her arms. $500,000. We created you, we dress, we educate you. How much do you think this cost, her? It's not a competition, Mother, Anastasia replied without raising the tone. I'm not charging anything. I just ask you to recognize, this house is also part of my story now. The father, still shaken by the conversation with Kirill the night before, interrupted, Nastya, I didn't know the value. Your mother told me it was a small amount, that the rest came from a cousin. What a cousin, Daddy? You have no sister, just a sister, he stammered, realizing how fragile the lie was. A distant cousin. Tamara Nikolaevna, finally pressured, exploded. Yes, I lied. Because I knew that if he knew how much you gave, I would feel obliged to gather you with this damn summer. I wanted the house to be ours, to decide who enters or leave, and chose a strange Svetlana instead of her own daughter. The words came out like knives, but that's what came after it frozen Anastasia's blood. She cries, the mother released, as if it justified everything. Cry. Anastasia repeated incredulously. Do you rent my renovation to strangers, while your grandchildren are left out, and still have the courage to say she cries? Tamara Nikolaevna, for the first time, seemed to be shrinking. It's our property. We can do whatever we want. Enough, Tamara, Igor cut, exhausted. Our daughter is right. We act ugly. He turned to Anastasia, the damp eyes. Forgive us. Of course you can be all summer. This house, hesitated. What do you mean, too? Tamara Nikolaevna protested, but her husband was relentless. The documents are ours, yes. But without Nastia's money, we would have sold this shed for 3 pennies last year. She saved this place. This gives her moral right over him. The silence that settled was so heavy that even the wind seemed to stop. Are you going to sell Dacha? Anastasia asked, stunned. Yes, admitted the father. I even had a buyer. They offered 300,000, a misery, but the state was deplorable. Then you appeared with the renovation proposal, and we decided to stay with the house. Tamara Nikolaevna bit her lip, but didn't argue. The truth, after all, was undeniable. The rest of the day was a tense silence, punctuated only by the distant laughs of the children. At night, while Kirill helped his father-in-law to fix the broken water pump, Nastasia caught her mother moving in papers with nervousness. What is that? Tamara Nikolaevna was startled, trying to hide the documents, but not before her daughter saw the bank logo. Mom, are you in financial problems? At first, Tamara tried to dodge, but then collapsed, like a boring balloon. Your father doesn't know. I got a loan for 2 years, to help Vadim. The name of Anastasia's younger brother fell like a stone. The Vadim. He wanted to start a business in St. Petersburg. He asked 300,000, promised to return with interest. Of course he never paid. Anastasia closed her eyes. And didn't you tell Dad? He would be devastated. So I started to rent the rooms, to cover the installments. Suddenly, it all made sense. The resistance to welcoming the family, the lies about money, the mysterious Svetlana. Why didn't you ask me for help? Anastasia asked, her broken voice not for her anger but for the pain of seeing her mother so fragile. You had already given everything in the renovation. How could I ask more? At that moment, Anastasia understood. Behind the mask of coldness, her mother hid shame and vulnerability. And perhaps an ancestral fear of losing control. The next morning Anastasia called Vadim. The conversation was arduous. He first denied, then promised to pay when things got better, until he suffered in lamentations on his difficult life. In the end, she was straightforward. Either you start paying 15,000 a month to pay off your mother's debt, or I count everything to Dad and act to justice. The ultimatum has had an effect. At night Anastasia gathered the family. He told about the deal with Vadim, which tears tears from Tamara relief. Then he exposed his plan. Let's formalize this. We invested $500,000 in this house. In return, I want the deed of half of it in my name. Do you want to steal half of our property? Tamara exploded. No, mother. I want my children to have the right to come here without you. Next year, invent that Svetlana needs the room. And I want Daddy not to sell anything when the next crisis appears. Igor Gennadievich reflected, then nodded. It's fair. We will do the donation on your part. Anastasia added, and one more thing, you can rent the rooms when we are not here. But July and August are ours. Gleb needs this air. Polina, this space. After heated discussions, they reached an agreement. Tamara, realizing that her daughter didn't want to take anything, but to protect what was from everyone, finally gave way. When the summer ended, Dacha was no longer just one point on the map, but a place where, for the first time in years, the family had met again, not without scars, but with the certainty that sometimes the most difficult battles are fought for what really matters. 5 years. A sigh on the timeline, but enough to turn lives. Anastasia and Kirill, with the determination of who knows the value of the effort, joined each rubles saved until they were able to enter those 58 square meters that now called home. It was not a palace, but it was theirs, 3 cozy rooms where the laughter of Gleb, now a first-year student, with the backpack than his back mixed with the balbucio de Paulina, who returned from the childhood garden with paint and crazy stories about the imaginary friend who lives in the closet. Meanwhile, Igor Gennadievich exchanged the report folders for the hoe and the smell of wet earth. Retirement returned him to the dacha, where he now spent the days pruning rose iris, teaching glebes to fish in the cold winter lake and pretending not to see when Paulina stole strawberries straight from the foot. The wrinkles on his face seemed softer, as if the porch sun and the noise of the grandchildren had smoothed the edges of time. Tamara Nikolaevna, in turn, carried a lightness she hadn't had for decades. With the help of Vadim, that son who always knew how to be a bridge instead of wall dash, settled the debt that for years was a shadow over your shoulders. The hard lines around his mouth softened, and even his tone of voice gained a hot honey hue when he spoke to his daughter. The agreement sealed that summer night was not just a role, it was a reliable pact. Half of the dacha now had the name of Anastasia in the record, but in practice the whole place belonged to them, to the laughs that echoed through the garden, the meals that extended to dusk, to the certainty that that floor was land, not mined field. The summers became sacred. As Moscow choked under the hot asphalt, the children ran barefoot through the grass, returning home with their knees and their pockets full of precious stones. Anastasia and Kirill made the weekend pilgrimage, carrying bags full of clothes that always returned with smell of barbecue and earth. In weekdays, the rooms were still rented after all. Reality is not only supported by nostalgia, but now everything was combined in advance, without secrets or resentment. The guests arrived and departed as secondary characters of a story whose main plot was the family. It was in one of these nights, when the silence of the porch was only broken by the corner of the crickets and the distant murmur of the men discussing the plans of the new greenhouse. "No, father, the plastic cannot stand the winter," that Tamara took her daughter's hand. Her fingers, once so agile to sew wounds with words, are now slightly trembled, as if they carried the weight of all that was not said. "I knew, Nasia." Anastasia felt her heart accelerate, as always happened when her mother wore that diminutive childhood. "I thank Kirill for that conversation with his father. He forced us to look in the mirror." The voice failed for a second. "We were unfair to you." "Very unfair." Anastasia did not need to answer. It smiled, because some truths don't require words, just the relief of finally heard them. And when Tamara repeated, like a mantra, "Yes, now it's okay," it was not an empty phrase. It was the confirmation that sometimes the chasms that separate us are disguised bridges. The most surprising? If it weren't for that conflict, those harsh words, that fear of losing everything, they would never have found the way back. Sometimes it is necessary to reach the edge of the cliff to understand that the most solid floor is on the other side. And there were, on the porch that Kirill had renovated with his own hands, listening to the nightly choir of insects and seeing the full moon born over the treetops, as a silent witness that some stories, when rewritten with courage, have finals better than we dream. Anastasia closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about how a single conversation, the one in which Kirill faced Igor with the calm of those who have nothing to hide, had redirected the course of everything. Sometimes, just put the points in the is so that the rest of the sentence makes sense. And suddenly the blank page becomes the beginning of something new.